Hi, welcome to High Road. My name's Andrew, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to play a D major chord. But if you want the quick version, here it is. Alright, in case you want to jump ahead, this video is going to cover the following 4 topics. What notes is a D major chord made from? How to read it from a chord diagram? How to actually play it? And some advanced techniques to help you get your D chord to sound as good as it can. So first of all, what notes is a D major chord made from? Well, it's made from the notes D, F sharp, and A. So on the guitar, that looks like this. D, A, another D, and then an F sharp. So a chord diagram is a picture of your guitar looking from this angle. The vertical lines are the strings, and the horizontal lines are the frets. The double line at the top is the nut. And by the way, on guitar we number the fingers 1, 2, 3, 4. If you play piano, that could be confusing because on piano, thumb is 1, but not on guitar. Lastly, at the top of the chord diagram, you'll see circles and crosses. Circles indicate open strings, which are supposed to just ring freely, and the crosses are strings that you should not play. You can either mute them or just not hit them. Now when you're interpreting a chord diagram, you've got to learn how to flip that image around in your mind the way you see it when you're playing. So this is what you see on the diagram, but this is what you see when you look down at your guitar. So you have to learn to actually flip that around mentally, and you'll get the hang of it pretty quickly. So let me show you how to actually play it. Finger 2 goes on fret 2 of string 1. Finger 3 goes on fret 3 of string 2. And finger 1 goes on fret 2 of string 3. Then you strum from strings 4 to 1. If we can, we actually try to avoid playing strings 5 and 6. A lot of chord diagrams for a D chord will show that string 5 is optional. That's basically true because string 5 is an open A, and we've already got an A in the chord. So it's compatible with the D chord. But a D major chord will always sound best when the lowest note of the chord is a D. So if we add that A, it's going to give it a slightly different sound. Here's a D chord with a D on the bottom. And here's a D chord with an A on the bottom. It's not a bad sound, it's just not as pure a D chord as with 4 strings. If you're a beginner, you may not be able to hear much difference between the two, but as your ears mature and you develop as a musician, hopefully you'll start to be able to hear the differences between those 2 different versions of D. String 6 is definitely one that you want to avoid. Most diagrams will have a cross at the top of that string, and that's because that note is an E, and a D major chord is not supposed to have any E's in it, let alone on the bottom. Here's what a D chord sounds like with just strings 4 to 1. Here's what it sounds like with strings 5 to 1. Here's what it sounds like with all 6 strings, including this bottom E. My ears immediately can tell something's not right there. I'm hoping yours can tell that too. But if you can't tell much difference, if you don't think that bottom E sounds bad, probably just take my word for it and try not to hit it until one day when your ears can hear that that sounds out of place with this chord. So let's talk about some advanced techniques to get your D chord to sound as good as it can. First of all, you need to get your fingers up on their tips and as close to the frets as you possibly can. That means that you won't have to press as hard and you're more likely to get a good solid tone and no buzzing. I'd also recommend that you push your fingers nice and far forward so that you can actually get your fingers up onto their fingertips. For most people, the hardest thing with a D chord is that finger 2 doesn't seem to want to cooperate with the other 2 fingers. You actually have to straighten finger 2 a little bit, so it's going to be at a different angle to the other 2 fingers, and that's so that you can get it up onto its tip. If you don't do that, finger 2 is likely to collapse forward. Now I mentioned earlier that when you play a D chord, you want to avoid hitting string 6. So there's a couple of ways you can do that. The first way is just to strum as carefully as possible. But even though I can usually strum accurately enough just to hit those 4 strings, I can't do it every single time. I'm always going to sometimes make a mistake and hit some other strings. That's the nature of strumming. So let me give you the insurance policy. Your left thumb. The best way to guarantee that you're going to get a clean D chord is to wrap your thumb around the back of the neck and lightly mute string 6 with the side of your thumb. That way that string is taken out of action, and even if you accidentally hit it, we're not going to hear it. So I'm going to hit all 6 strings now, as sloppy as I like, and we're not going to hear that bottom E string. A lot of beginners are encouraged to play a D chord with their hand dropped down below the neck like this. That does make it a little bit easier for your fingers to find the right angles. While this position is a little bit easier for classical playing and for beginners, it's not a very realistic position for strumming because you've got no way of muting the bottom E string. So between strumming accurately and using your left thumb to mute string 6, we're pretty much assured of getting a good clean D sound. You're still going to hit string 5 occasionally, but like I mentioned before, that note isn't going to sound terrible, it's just not going to sound as good as just the top 4 strings. Some guitar teachers would frown upon using the thumb over the back of the neck like this, and I can see their point, but in reality, this is what guitar players do. If you watch anyone who's a professional guitarist and they're playing a D chord, they've got their thumb over the back if they're strumming. As long as this doesn't become a bad habit, and as long as it doesn't affect your overall hand grip and the angles of your fingertips, then it's fine, and it's a good thing to do. Probably the last thing I'll mention to get a good sound out of a D chord is to make sure that you're hitting all the notes evenly. A lot of beginners tend to hit the bass strings very hard. I'm not sure why, probably because they're strumming from the elbow, which causes a slicing motion. So you tend to hit these first strings here on a downstroke heavier than the others, and you get a bit of an unbalanced sound. What you want to do is hit 4 or 5 strings with a very balanced stroke and hit all the strings evenly. And you do that by using a curved pick motion strumming from the wrist, like that. And that's how you play a D major chord.